Hello and welcome to One on One. I'm Vernon Ramesar. I'm very pleased to say my guest today is a man who holds a special place in the pantheon of Caribbean cultural icons, Mr. Peter Minshall. Minsh, welcome to the program.
Thanks, glad to be here.
And we should mention you have a little problem with your neck right now.
I have no problem with my neck.
You okay?
I'm a Morocco. I pull it into my house and I put it out of my house.
Now, many years ago, you had a monumental work, River. I want to ask you, in retrospect, do you think River and the message contained in it was prophetic in terms of the society that we are facing right now?
Prophetic. I would be loath to take upon myself the mantle of prophet or prophecy. I would say this, though, as I look back over the years of work in the Mast, starting with the Hummingbird in '74, Paradise Lost in '76, and going right through over 30 years of work in the theatre of the streets of Port of Spain, I would say that River, performed by a band of about 2,000 people of colour on a small Caribbean island in the early 80s, was, as I look from the beginning to the end of the 20th century, probably one of the most profound works of art anywhere on the environment. It was a solid piece of work, and it happened on a little island in the southern Caribbean. A river of cloth, a river of people, one love, one people, led by washerwoman, pure of heart and spirit, like the waters of the river. A river coveted by man crab, man whose greed and lust for power is now aided and abetted by technology. Man crab wants the river to build his factory on its banks. A simple story, but as powerful in its simplicity as the blazing sun in the day sky. Man crab offers an illusory rainbow of colour to the people, with promises of profit and luxury for all. And he wins. I have the synopsis here.
We'd love to
May
hear
I share it with you?
Yes.
As a matter of fact, I was asked by Pablo Delano to write the introduction to a book of beautiful photographs that's going to be published in the fall. And River and Tapestry and The Lost Tribe are reprinted in full, the synopses of these three bands in full as part of the introduction. And I myself was surprised when I went back to River to read what it is it said and what it is we played on the streets that year. River, 1983, a mass in 2 acts. The cast, man crab, washerwoman, the river people. The story. We first meet man crab and washerwoman at the Carnival preliminaries, which is a sort of prologue or overture. We can see straight away that man crab is very clever, an accomplished master of technology, full of complicated genius. He's clearly most powerful and dangerous. Yet he's never satisfied or content with himself. Enough is never enough for man crab. He always wants more. Washerwoman is just the opposite. She's really quite simple, as her costume shows. Her power is her love for life, which is the simplest thing of all. Her heart is pure and clean and happy, like her lines of washing dancing in the breeze. Washerwoman is the beloved leader of the river people. On Carnival Monday, Act 1, man crab embattles washerwoman. He is eager to take from her the river, which he needs for his own purposes of enrichment, to build his factory on its banks. But he must first defeat her and win over her people's trust. Washerwoman's very strength is in that trust, and it is with that trust and love in the form of a simple square of white cloth that she overcomes Man Crab and banishes him from the savannah. Carnival Monday, I remember it well. Washerwoman leads her people in happy celebration before us. The river people, all in white, dance and sing. The river is saved. Its waters run clear and clean as their hearts. But that night, Man Crab develops a clever strategy. He settles quietly by the riverbank, and using his finest chemicals and oils, assisted by his best technicians, he floods the river with a rainbow of extraordinary color. He stirs the water with glowing promises of profit and luxury for all. The river people are truly amazed. They run to see, and with buckets and calabashes and cups, anything to hold water, they attempt to catch and keep Man Crab's illusory colors, each fighting the other for more. In their haste and greed, they leave Washerwoman unprotected. That very night, Man Crab steals into Washerwoman's mast camp, which is no longer surrounded by the force of love. He kills her. On Carnival Tuesday, Act 2, Man Crab is victorious. The river is his. The waters are polluted. He drags the lifeless body of Washerwoman before us, her lines of washing now blood-stained and borne by others. The Rainbow River follows, and the river people. They are wild and frenzied in their dance. They believe themselves the richer for Man Crab's rainbow. They bathe themselves in its colors. In so doing, they destroy themselves. We now live in the age of Man Crab. 25 years later, his triumph seems complete. The island races helter-skelter-smelter to self-destruction. Greed and tribal dominance, oil and money, and empty pomposity born of ignorance and insecurity have made the island a living, surreal nightmare.
It's a bleak picture.
It's a bleak country. No little police commissioner is going to be able to come along and stop the crime. The seeds for the crime were sown at least 30 years ago. No one heeded or listened to the true sound and melody that came from Pan even before independence. No one paid attention to the fact that young inner-city gangs of layabouts who used to set upon each other with guns and knives of steel or whatever weaponry came to hand. Out of the miraculous intervention of the universe centuries ago, placing the oil deep in the womb of this little island, and all sorts of things that were happening on the planet that had nothing to do with us. Out of the unconscious listening over a period of at least 150 years at the sound of that other rather complicated percussive instrument, the piano, pong, 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 listen to it, ping, pong, playing Mozart or whatever. And then after emancipation, the arrival on the island of drums brought by another tribe that in ritual procession down the street hung around the neck after being heated to get their tone and beat with 2 sticks. Reel forward a bit. These gangs that went by names like desperados, invaders, and such. These gangs who had no school to go to, no job to go to, and you would think, or so they thought at the time, nothing better to do with their time than to go ping pong, ping pong, ping pong, ping pong, until a biscuit tin became an oil drum, became a drum that hangs around the neck and beats with 2 sticks made out of steel to sound like a piano. What a miracle. But the real miracle was that these young men pointed the way forward, which is that they laid down their guns and knives of steel and did combat with each other on drums of steel through music. But this is mythical. It is like some story that the ancients would have written. But it happened here on our island, right under our very eyes. To be independent surely means to be self-determining. And these young men determined themselves. But who listened? Who learnt the lesson? Who, like the ancients, knew that when such a thing happens, you build a temple to give thanks to the gods? Who was the great leader upon independence that knew it was his duty to build a cathedral of a concert hall to celebrate this great lesson that occurred in our midst? 40 years later, the gods are punishing us for our blindness. I'm an artist, and this is how I feel, and this is how I see. That beautiful savannah looks as though it were some ill-kept backyard, while the Prime Minister and his wife live in a palace with a Roman temple, gilded no less, that was to have had a golden dome. Thank God someone thought better of that, because it looked like something from a 1940s Hollywood musical. The one thing the Mass has taught me, not as a politician, but as an artist, is to put my ear to the ground, to listen to the rhythm of the people. That is why sometimes, people would say, why is he so late? Because I have to find the essential truth for the now. And another great artist who dealt with words, who made poems and plays, but who also came from a hot country and an impassioned people, Federico Garcia Lorca, said of me in the Mass, why I'm in it. Why did I, having taken my bows on the stage up there in Foreign and had a standing ovation and reviews in the national British press, why did I come back to do the Mass? Why? Lorca explains. The poem, the song, the picture are but water drawn from the well of the people, and it must be given back in a cup of beauty, so they may drink, and in drinking understand themselves. Sorry. You give me a platform and I stand up and talk. Stop. Surely you have a question to ask.
But you've been answering them quite well so far. But you've offered that cup of beauty over the years, Vinch. And yet, as you mentioned...
By the way, the thing about river, and one thing you have to understand, listen to what Federico Garcia Lorca says. The poem, the song, the picture, and the mass more than any of them, are but water drawn from the well of the people, and it must be given back to them. The thing about river is that it could not have happened but by permission of the people. Everything up until that moment that happened in a mass camp was to cut a piece of this, cut a piece of that, put it down, stick it down with the glue according to a pattern. And this lunatic man comes along, knowing, of course, that this farcical tale being told by certain religious zealots that Pagua has nothing to do with that thing they called Carnival is a load of nonsense. In fact, the oldest living continuum of Carnival on the planet Earth is the Holi Festival in India. It is the spring festival of spring festivals, which is what Carnival it is, to celebrate life and to engender the people and the land with abundance and fertility. The throwing on of the abir is to make people fertile. It's deeply symbolic, and there is nothing. I mean, there are stories of celebrants in the Holi Festival. There is Shiva. Now, pick out the similarities. There is Shiva, a man covered in mud on the back of a donkey, being led down the street, and around him are young boys with epiphallic symbols hurling obscenities at the high and mighty, out of which, of course, is derived our own calypso. Carnival is a time when the world is turned upside down. It is the lord of misrule. And rulers had better watch themselves, because Carnival time, with all the stepping up with whichever politician you want at election time, Carnival time is a time to take them down a step or two.
Well,
unless, of course, the powers that be have tied a noose around the neck of Carnival and brought it to heel.
Which is a possibility, Minch.
Which is a fact, Vernon. It is in some people's interest that the Carnival is merely a handful of sequins and beads today. Most of my ancestors were sold into slavery for a handful of brightly colored beads. I look at the Carnival of today, and what do I see?
But it's a metaphor for our society as well, Minch, isn't it? We've sold our culture and our souls for a few brightly colored buildings downtown, or a few little flashy things. Our values are drifting. And once they're drifting, how do you ever get them back?
Let that question settle and simmer a little bit and turn to another pot and stir it, please. How do you get them back? You face certain truths. I have a bunch of papers here. I've just come back from York.
Yeah, we should mention you were at
the
conference.
And there were a lot of things I had to say, and one of the things I went there with, I just, you know, if your mind is focused on sharing certain thoughts, I mean, if you're doing a band, if you're painting a painting that's all about little dots, everything that you see You know, you may be walking the streets and the pavement has a pattern on it and you see the little dots, or somebody has a blouse. In that sort of focus, I came across this. What was your question?
I'm talking about the idea of us selling our souls for some flashy beads and our values drifting. How do we get them back?
In an article, in the op-ed page of the New York Times I read recently, the article is about Karadzic and war's lessons. Karadzic of Bosnia, of course. But there's just this line from a journalist. He took away from the war this knowledge: the indivisibility of integrity and the importance of a single dissenting voice. I really don't understand at all this notion of Vision 2020. I don't understand it. If it is in fact about a shopping basket going to Miami and saying, I'll have one of these, and bringing back concrete and steel and erecting them at Port of Spain, that's not it. And if it is, that when I look at our island and see very clearly, no, this is not a working democracy. This is a political system that benefits those in power of two tribes. And whichever tribe is in power is able to put its hand into the ground and spend the money. And that stuff in the ground really is not just for us. It's not just for this person or that person. I really do feel that that stuff in the ground is also for our children and our children's children, and that we really have not got the license to spend it profligately. Is that the right word?
It sounds good to me.
Something like that. Anyway, spend. And I sometimes look around and I see us as who we are, where we are, near to the equator, and I wonder why years ago we didn't give a tax break or whatever it is you give to house owners, that every galvanized rooftop or tiled rooftop, depending on what class or who you are, has solar heating. Oh, we don't have to do that, we have the oil. Please, let us do that and save some of the oil for a rainy day. And that same mode of understanding I would like to apply to culture and to the terms by which we express ourselves. It seems to me that we're sort of falling headlong between some Scylla and Charybdis, which I choose to describe as ignorance and enlightenment. Ignorance of self, and enlightenment is self-explanatory. This little boy used to walk up to Memorial Park every day after school to play with his friends. Memorial Park, or underneath the kind of darkness that went underneath the Royal Victoria Institute, little children crawling through, and over into the Princess Building grounds. Princess Building was a big cream building with arches at one end, and the most beautiful saman tree in all the world. At the back of it and in front of it, a little cream fountain. We used to play as children around the fountain. In old time, what I would now call tin-in roller skates, not the rollerblade things of today. And we'd pitch marbles and fly kites at Easter. So I grew up and I go away, and the Princess Building burns down. And the goodly Christians, wanting to light up a place bigger than Diwali, kill the saman tree by trying to turn it into a champagne glass with colored lights year after year after year. And the little fountain is all but dead, filled with garbage and newspaper. But look what happens. A big oil company in these times comes along to clean the fountain up. And this sprightly little fountain is once more giving life to water as it reaches into the air. But what do? They build a 9-foot steel railing around the fountain. And in all the art, in all the modern art, in all the conceptual art, in all the sculpture that I have seen, up and down the islands, in my time, no work has been as profoundly disturbing as the imprisoned fountain. I used to pass it every day. Every day I thought, no, this is such a metaphor for my people. We appear to be free, bubbling up into the air, but we are imprisoned between ignorance and enlightenment. A fountain is life. A fountain is symbolic of the everlasting ejaculation. You do not imprison a fountain. You don't imprison a fountain. You cannot imprison a fountain. I said, why have they done this? And somebody said, oh, it is because the vagrants would bathe in the fountain. But surely the big oil company should have made bathhouses for the vagrants and even put beds in a home for them, and not prevent the rest of us from going and sitting, young lovers on the fountain, throwing a little penny, making a wish. When I see the carnival of today, when I see the culture of today, when I see the crime of today, I see the fountain in a prison. It's as though the burglar proofing is such a disease in this country. It reach a fountain and all. When I look at emancipation happening right now, I have to ask, what is emancipation? And no one, please, this is dicey territory here, but emancipation is being celebrated with an exhibition of paintings.
No, Minshall, I wanted to go on that. We're actually out of time for this program. Would you mind if we continue in the next program, if you have the time?
If you have the coffee.
I will have the coffee if you have the time. We'll be right back with more. Minshall, in the previous interview, we ended talking about vagrants and fountains.
Vagrants and fountains.
As a metaphor.
Yes, and it seems that the curse of the imprisoned fountain God, and the curse of the cathedral of a concert hall that was not built on that spot. You know what I see on that spot? And I visited the Prime Minister and shared with him my vision, but that's all past, that's all history now. I really do see on that spot a shimmering cathedral of a concert hall. I think of Frank Gehry's Guggenheim in Bilbao, covered with titanium. I mean, why do churches have spires? I suppose in an attempt to architecturally take the human spirit to the heavens. So I really do see spires that might be quite useless, but I also think of Gaudi's extraordinary structure in the city of Barcelona to the Sagrada Family. But somewhere in there, with a great rotunda at the bottom, I do see a cathedral of a concert hall, specifically designed for orchestras of steel. And I even see and hear its name ringing around the world, the steel drum. Instead of which, felled by the curse of the imprisoned fountain, we are building a blue igloo. I'm speechless. I don't understand the look of this building. I don't understand its Victorian name, the Academy for the Performing Arts. There's a lot I don't understand. But there's... such a lot in the world that so many of us don't understand. We were talking last time too about
Well, Emancipation Day.
yes, well,
and art.
emancipation and an exhibition of painting, and there's room for thought here in that I spoke earlier on of most of my ancestors being sold into slavery for a handful of brightly colored beads. Most of my ancestors also would sing and dance in preparation for the hunt. And there would be song and dance too, for the planting of the crops, for the reaping of the crops, for the preparation of the great feast, for the marriage, for the coming of age. There would be song and dance. People would go inside only to sleep. The art as such would be primarily sculptural. And there is one thing, the black tribe, the dark tribes have a propensity, a great facility for abstraction. Muscular, strong, vigorous. And these sculptures or masks would be worn invariably on the head, in the dance, in celebration of the gods and in communication with one's fellows. In speaking of the Mass in York just a few days ago, I spoke of the man who awakes in the morning, washes his naked body, reaches into the earth, extracts the raw pigment, and meticulously makes marks on his body in celebration of his gods and in communication with his fellows. And this is called art. And the other man who awakes in the morning, washes his body, dresses, that is, clothes himself, reaches into the earth for the raw pigments, encases them in a box or a tube, and for a monetary exchange, passes them on to another fellow who goes home and makes marks meticulously on a piece of paper, a canvas, a board, and hangs it on the wall in celebration of his gods and in communication with his fellows. And this too is called art, except that our received knowledge is that this art, and therefore this fellow, is refined. And this art, and therefore this fellow, is coarse and primitive. And I'm old enough now, and have looked around enough now, and have learnt to love now all the art of this fellow, but also, being of this island, all the art of this fellow. I'm old enough now to say to you and you and you and the whole world that within the womb and the breast and the phallus of coarse and primitive reside potency and vitality, which refined is very hard pressed to produce. And as I see it, and sight has to do with vision, my vision for us as a people is that we, in determining ourselves and our future, embrace this fellow and embrace this fellow and find the path at the tip of the spear that leads into the future, that the world might know which way to go. Crick-crack.
So when we have an emancipation art exhibit, to you is that sort of selling out, in fact, the genuine heritage?
I'm saying, no, I would not, please. Great painting is great painting. But when you really get down to the mud and the dirty and you wrestle it out, and you make it simple so that a schoolboy or a schoolgirl could understand. And you make it clear before you make your statement. Hello, there is no right and wrong here, but it is a statement. White people's art is about keeping the dead alive. All those marble busts, all those glorious effigies, all the way through history, and every single one of those paintings, hello, is still life. It's still life, hanging on the wall. And black people's art, Mr. Cameraman, I'm going to get up, prepare yourself, is in the living now. And these are two valid philosophies on human existence, on the world. We exist only in the living now. Every great teaching teaches us all you have is this moment. The past is history. The future is a mystery. Today is a gift. That is why we call it the present. It's a little Reader's Digest-y, but it is a valid consideration. And our divine task as the people of the Caribbean, having both the art of meditation and consideration and thought that exists on the wall, and the art of the here and now of a Baryshnikov or a Martha Graham or an Alvin Ailey leap through the air, I'm sorry, or a Beryl McBurney. Or of an entire mass band. Ah, dear. Let us be a little comic, please. And I'm going to put the question into your mouth, being a former broadcaster myself. So tell me, Minshall, you playing devil's advocate, what have you got against all these beautiful young ladies in their bikinis and feathers and beads? You want to know?
I may have an idea, but I want to hear it from you.
Well, boy, this one really sweet. For centuries, I mean for centuries, hundreds and hundreds of years, white women have been wearing big skirts. From Queen Elizabeth I all the way through, right through to Marie Antoinette, up to Queen Victoria. Big skirts. Well, you know the Victorians. They had to detail every leaf of every twig of every branch of every tree and all the roots. Every butterfly and bird that rested on the tree. My boy went to the Galapagos, Darwin. He changed over everything of creationism, coming back now. Oh, please. Evolution. The Victorians sent Livingstone to Africa to find out more down there. They sent back to London and put on display in the city of London for the first time a black woman, naked, except for a few feathers and beads. And all of Victorian London gaped in astonishment. A strange thing happened at the turn of the century. Early in the 20th century, in some kind of wild sexual fantasy, after all these hundreds and hundreds of years of big skirt, they put on display, not one, not two, but a whole line of white women, naked, except for a few feathers and beads. And you know what they called them? Show girls. Now the funny part is that 100-odd years later, here in Trinidad, year after year, what it is we have, black girls dressing up like white girls who were dressing up like black girls. In other words, we're a fantasy of ourselves. That's kind of funny, but not funny ha-ha. And why? Because nobody knew what the carnival was. Who knows what theatre is? We live on a little island. We don't know our art from our elbow, far less our mass. The rest of the world is into conceptual this and performance that, and with the advent of so much visual stuff, magazines, the computer, the television, the cinema, the paintings on the wall have had to take a kind of place in history. It's still valid to make a beautiful image, but so much of it now becomes mere wallpaper. And here we are, abandoning that most powerful tool of communication, the living now. And make no mistake about it, Brazil, the carnival in Brazil, is hale and hearty. They are as magnificent as we were in the years of Bailey. A few little ladies get up on trophy things and do the samba, which is different from our Trinidad jam and wine. Mm. Quite elegant when a woman, because the energy all flows from the floor up, whereas our energy starts very blatantly from the midsection down and up. The wine is centered around the belly button. I think it's, please, I'm not talking about me. People get...
But I'm wondering, in terms of the carnival that we have now that we're talking about, I mean, both sides are complicit, aren't they? The band leaders seem to lack any imagination whatsoever, and yet they will also say that their supporters want that sort of costume. They want the bees in the bikini. I mean, does that mean carnival is dead?
It means no such thing. And it means no such thing. Regardless of what you wear, the energy is there. 1,000 people in bras and panties moving to the music is a powerful force. The tragedy, though, is not it's not the lack of clothes. It's the complete lack of thought or heart or spirit. If you look at the fancy sailor costumes that were not done by any avant-garde designers of the 50s and 60s, the fancy sailor costumes that grew out of the people just as the pan, all of the best art of this island grew out of the people. That is why mass, when well done, with heart and spirit, rivals any other art form in terms of the power of communication. I cannot tell you what it feels like for an artist who has, with a team of artisans, produced The Midnight Robber. And he appears on stage at the Savannah for the first time, and the audience, grandstand and north stand, erupts in a way that they don't in a cinema or in the theater or in an art gallery. It's like, it's visceral, it's instantaneous. And I could spend hours analyzing the raison d'etre for that. And River, in its time, by the goodly judges, was placed 10th and last because it was so anti-middle-class ideas of what the comfortable armchair of the Trinidad Carnival is supposed to feel like. It was disturbing. And yet River, of all the works to come out of the Callaloo Company of the people of Trinidad, is the most remembered work. I think what is sad is that we didn't know what Pan was all about. We did not know that at the moment of independence, it was our vision should have been to have added onto every schoolroom throughout our 2 islands. Every schoolhouse should have had 2 rooms added, one for music, one for dance and music, in dance and movement. In the music room, a piano, that's all. A piano and a teacher to teach children to be literate in music. I would tell you that. I had this conversation with Chalky. Chalky said, oh God, Minch, you know you're right. Because once you have a tune in your head, you don't have time for no gun and knife. My God, it's hindsight, Lord. It is not what if, not what but to have spent some of that oil money on that which, I said it, most of our ancestors would sing and dance at every possible opportunity. But there seems to be in our head some, you see, ignorance and enlightenment. There's some clash between that and what we perceive to be the world that we should be attaining. Instead of thinking and answering to who we are, we're answering to some kind of standard set by other than us, let me just say plainly. This is an island. The world is on the brink of environmental disaster. Well, surely we want to avoid building too many steel, glass, and concrete buildings, pumping up with air conditioning and I mean, is there not some validity to think really with a visionary mind, not to 2020, but to 2050, and think, and then we will be the only island in the world with no building taller than a coconut tree. And we will by then be the most famous and beautiful island in the world. God forbid that Port of Spain should start to look like Miami. But we're off to a real good start.
Or Singapore.
Indeed. I mean, you know, they already have a head start. And what does Singapore look like? Small New York? Big deal. Anyway, you know, please, let's...
Well, no, I want to ask you, given that as a people our primary heritage is an artistic one, what we've given the world most of all comes from the arts.
Here, to take that up very quickly, point that didn't hit me until I'm at York. And there are carnavalistas and carnavalistas from London, from New York, and of course the host city there is giving us Caravana. Now let us deal with the facts almost from an anthropological, objective point of view. This little island that was colonized over several hundred years, in the 20th century, starts sending seeds and blossoms outwards in small numbers. A little handful of Trinis in London, and some gatherings of Trinis, and fellow Caribbean people in New York and Canada and what have you. And the clusters become larger, and something happens. Why is it that wherever we gather, we sing and we dance for the hunt and the feast and the this and that and the other? We're out in the streets doing the thing. And why is it that our artists have abandoned the people? Why is it that all the people are outside in the streets singing and dancing, begging for the artists to adorn them with spiritual meaning, but the artists are inside, painting paintings, writing plays to be put on in another inside called a theatre. And the artists are even trying to take the carnival and squeeze it into theatre, because we really don't believe that anything that we could do could be possibly good. After all, somebody once said to me, an artist who I love and respect, said to me, oh, well, Minshall, you know you came in through the back door. And it is out that our self-contempt is so deeply embedded. A theatrician from New York, a famous theatrician from New York, corrected me when once I made the mistake of saying, well, you've got to understand that our Carnival is akin to your Broadway. It is our collective catharsis. He says, please do not compare what you do here to what they do in Broadway. In Broadway, you have a captive audience in a building. Here, your entire society erupts in a kind of spectator participating with participator. The whole thing is, you can touch it, you can feel it, and you've only just begun to do the beautiful experiment that every person in theatre has wanted to do for centuries. I exhaust. I tired, you see me here, yes? I know I'd have plenty more work to do. But we have to rub out this business of smile and shine for Broadway. Jean-Michel Jarre, years ago, over dinner in Paris, after one of those events, he said to me earnestly, Peter Minshall, you have no idea how important your work is. Everybody is now locked inside, in front of a television screen, in front of a computer screen, always in front of a screen, inside, receiving life passively. And you have the ability of pulling them outside, to be together, to feel a part of each other and of the whole. As the Milky Way is in the night, to be one with the trees around the savannah, to stop the traffic, to say, yes, and now it is our time. This order that you have, this, and that is why you crown a king of Carnival. It is not so much disorder. It is, on these 2 days, to make sense of all the nonsense that you are for the rest of the year, strapped into this position. You know what it must be like for a bank clerk all year long. Yes, sir, so-and-so, there's your change, sir, here's your card. Or a stevedore, to just go out, to start with Juve. I really cannot understand. Please, my mind is all over the place now. I don't understand why it is you want to talk about marketing, you want to talk about cultural industry. The most marketable thing we have is a Juve. You just let the world know that we have this specially, this beautifying mud. You just put that in. You find the right words to dress it up. But there is this biblical ritual that the people of Trinidad do in the pre-dawn of, and the word itself, Juve, the opening of the day. In 20 years, the Spanish have thousands of people come to revel in squashed, overripe tomatoes. You could imagine what this rejuvenating mud of Trinidad, this from the earth we come, back to the earth we go, where people are joined together in spirit, and and the music jamming, and the sun rises. Now that, please, I haven't had that. Hello, and Tobago there, and Trinidad here. And years ago I said to some tourist person, they didn't take me on, you have these two islands in Trinidad. Experience living art. In Tobago, experience the art of living.
Minshall, you have me excited, but we're out of time again. So I thank you for being on the program. I'm sure you'll be back on again soon whenever you have time. And
next year.
I'm looking forward to what you have to say.
Ash Wednesday.
Ash Wednesday next year. Great. You've been viewing One-on-One. Join us again tomorrow for another edition.